My name is Amber Williams, and at 31 years old, I never thought I would be sitting alone in a sterile doctor's office, staring at my phone as silent tears traced paths down my cheeks. The thyroid tumor, a small, hard lump that had taken up residence in my throat, needed to come out. But according to my family's group chat, their 5-star, all-inclusive Cabo vacation was more important than driving me home from surgery, and NMY hands trembled as I typed the 2 words that had become the summary of my entire life. My mistake. What they didn't know, what they hadn't cared enough to ask, was that this wasn't just a simple procedure. This was cancer. In the phone call that was about to happen, a call made by a stranger who showed me more compassion than my own mother would change everything about that Cabo trip. And I have always known my place in the family hierarchy. It was a silent, unspoken caste system established in the cradle. My younger sister, Heather, was the baby, the precious one whose every whim was a command. My older brother, Jake, was the only son, the golden child destined for greatness. And I was just Amber, the middle child, the reliable one, the strong one, the one who, according to my parents, always had it together. That was the story they told themselves, a convenient fiction that allowed them to justify how differently they treated us. Growing up in our suburban Chicago home, the pattern was set early. When Heather wanted ballet lessons, my parents found the money. When Jake needed a new computer for his next big thing, they made it happen. But when I earned a partial scholarship to my dream art school in New York, my father suddenly threw out his back. "We need you close to home, Amber," my mother had said, her voice laced with that familiar tone of gentle, unbreakable manipulation. "You've always been so responsible." And so I stayed. I went to the local community college, rushing home between classes to care for a man who made a miraculous recovery 6 months later, long after my scholarship opportunity had evaporated. Family comes first, right? And then I became the family's unofficial bank, emotional shock absorber, and on-call crisis manager. I gave Jake my savings, $15,000 I had painstakingly put aside, for a mobile app that failed in 8 months. When I asked about it a year later, my mother intervened. "Why are you being so petty, Amber? You don't need to make him feel worse." No one ever seemed concerned about how I felt. Heather would call me at 2 a.m. crying about boyfriends, expecting me to be her therapist until dawn. She'd volunteer me for favors without asking. I was the strong one, the one who could handle it. NNMY last serious relationship ended when my boyfriend Paul told me, "Your family takes advantage of you and you let them. I can't compete with that." He was right. I had become an expert at hiding my disappointment, at swallowing my hurt. I learned to expect nothing so I would not be let down. None of them saw me crying in my car after holiday dinners. None of them knew about the therapy sessions I started last year. None of them knew how deeply, crushingly lonely I felt, until the day I found the lump in my throat and everything changed. The word cancer hung in the air of Dr. Carter's office, a heavy, suffocating thing. Papillary thyroid carcinoma, she had called it. Treatable, she had said. But all I heard was the echo of my own mortality. I walked out of that office in a daze, the world muted, as if my hearing had already begun to fade. The ultrasound, the biopsy, I went through it all alone, a ghost haunting the sterile corridors of the hospital. Each procedure, each needle prick, was a fresh reminder of my isolation. I told my family I had a sore throat when I skipped Sunday dinner. It was easier than explaining the truth, easier than watching their faces shift from fleeting concern to relief when they realized my crisis required no action on their part. NNTHE surgery was scheduled for the 15th. It was outpatient, but the anesthesia meant I couldn't drive myself home. I would need someone to pick me up, someone to stay with me for at least the first night. I would have to ask them for help. The thought made my stomach clench with a familiar, cold dread. And I spent that evening pacing my small apartment, rehearsing how I would ask, how I would phrase the request to minimize their inconvenience. In the end, I chose the family group chat. It felt safer, less vulnerable than a direct call, a request lobbed into the digital void rather than a plea made to a specific person. At 9:30 p.m., after crafting and deleting a dozen different versions, I finally settled on a message that felt neutral enough and hit send, NNHEY. Everyone, just wanted to let you know I'm having surgery to remove a thyroid nodule on the 15th. It's outpatient, but I will need someone to drive me home afterward. Let me know if anyone is available. I watched the screen, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. I saw the 2 blue check marks appear under the message for my mom, my dad, Jake, and Heather. They had all seen it. I waited for the typing bubbles, for the immediate flood of questions and offers of support. Nothing. 10 minutes passed. 20. 30 in, after 45 agonizing minutes, a response finally appeared. It was from Heather NNLOL. You actually thought we'd miss Cabo for that? We've been planning this trip for months. And I stared at the message, the casual cruelty of it, the laughing acronym, stealing my breath. Before I could even process it, another message popped up. My mother, NN, don't guilt us, Amber. This trip has been planned for months. Can you reschedule your surgery or ask a friend? NNMY fingers hovered over the keyboard, 1,000 angry, pleading, desperate responses running through my mind. I could tell them it was cancer. I could remind them of the $15,000 Jake never paid back, of the art school scholarship I gave up. I could beg. Instead, my thumbs moved with a numb, cold precision, typing out the 2 words that had become the summary of my entire life. NNMY mistake. And then I turned off my phone, curled up on my couch with my cat, Milo, and sobbed until my throat was raw and my eyes were swollen shut. The next day, after I had cried all the tears I had, I called a medical transport service. The $300 fee, a fortune to me, went onto a credit card already strained with medical bills. The day before my family left for Cabo, my mother called, her voice bright and cheerful. Just checking in before we leave tomorrow, she chirped. We'll be gone for 10 days. We're turning off our international data, so we'll only be on Wi-Fi at the resort. I'll send lots of pictures. She never mentioned my surgery. It was an inconvenience that had already been forgotten. My consultation with the surgeon, Dr. Thompson, was a cold dose of reality. He was a tall man with silver hair and a direct manner that left no room for comforting illusions. Based on the size and nature of your tumor, he explained, using diagrams to show the web of nerves and glands in my neck, we will likely need to remove the entire thyroid gland. He continued, listing the potential complications in a calm, steady voice, a small but real risk of permanent damage to my vocal cords, bleeding, infection, the need for lifelong thyroid replacement hormones. Do you have any questions? He asked when he finished. And I had dozens, but only one seemed to matter. How bad is the recovery? I asked, my voice small. I will be managing it alone. NHI's eyebrows, 2 silver slashes, rose slightly. Alone? That's not ideal. The first 72 hours are the most critical. You will be weak, in pain, and there is a risk of post-operative bleeding that would require immediate medical attention. Is there absolutely no one? NNTHE judgment in his tone, however slight, made me defensive. I have made arrangements, I said, not mentioning that those arrangements consisted of an elderly neighbor checking on my cat and a medical transport service I could barely afford. As I was leaving, a nurse named Christine followed me into the hallway. Amber, she said quietly, her eyes full of a kindness that nearly broke me. "I couldn't help but overhear. I'm concerned." She hesitated, then pressed on. "Sometimes people don't understand the seriousness of thyroid cancer. They hear, treatable, and think it's a minor issue. Have you told your family exactly what this surgery is for?" And I looked away, at a generic painting of a seaside landscape on the wall. "They're on vacation," I said, the words sounding as ridiculous as they felt. "In Cabo. It was planned months ago." "Would you like me to call them?" she offered. As a medical professional, I could explain the situation objectively. And for a moment, I was tempted. So tempted to let her make that call, to shatter their blissful ignorance with the cold, hard facts of my reality. But my pride, the same stubborn pride that had been both my shield and my cage for 35 years, wouldn't allow it. "No," I said firmly, meeting her gaze. "I don't want to ruin their trip. I'll be fine on my own. I always am." NNTHE, morning of my surgery, arrived with a spectacular sunrise I watched from my apartment window, sipping the last water I was allowed. I had been up since 4 a.m., too anxious to sleep. At 6:15, the medical transport van arrived. I sat in silence during the drive, watching the city wake up, feeling like a ghost moving through a world I was no longer a part of. The surgical waiting room was a sea of quiet support systems, husbands and wives, parents and children. Everyone had someone. Everyone except me. When my pager buzzed, a nurse led me to the pre-op area. I changed into the thin hospital gown, they took my vitals, they inserted an IV, and then a familiar face appeared through the curtain. It was Christine, and I assist Dr. Thompson on surgery days, she said with a warm smile. "I wanted to check on you." She glanced at the empty chair beside my gurney. "Amber," she said, her voice gentle but firm, "I know it's not my place, but I think they should know. If something were to happen," she didn't need to finish, and I thought about my family, probably on a beach now, laughing, oblivious. I thought about the possibility of complications, of waking up unable to speak, of dying alone, and in that moment, my pride finally crumbled, and maybe you're right. I conceded, my voice cracking. NNSHE squeezed my hand. "Do you have a number?" And I gave her my mother's cell, explaining about the Wi-Fi. "She'll only get the message when she connects. I'll make sure she understands," Christine promised. As she walked away, I felt a strange lightness. Whatever happened next, I wouldn't be carrying the burden of their ignorance anymore. The anesthesiologist placed a mask over my face. "Count backward from 10, Amber." I made it to 7 before the darkness took me. Thousands of miles away, in a sun-drenched resort in Cabo, Sandra Williams excused herself from the breakfast table, annoyed at the interruption. She saw the Chicago area code and assumed it was a robocall. She was about to decline when she noticed the caller ID Memorial Hospital. A sliver of unease cut through her vacation bliss. "Hello? Hello, Mrs. Williams. My name is Christine Reyes. I'm a nurse at Memorial Hospital, calling about your daughter, Amber." Sandra's annoyance sharpened into irritation. "Is something wrong? Her surgery isn't for another hour." "That's correct." Christine's voice was professionally calm, but firm. "I'm calling because Dr. Thompson and I felt you should be aware of the full nature of the procedure. Amber has papillary thyroid carcinoma." NNTHE word hit Sandra with the force of a physical blow. "What? What did you say? Cancer?" Her voice echoed in the marble hallway of the resort. "No, she never said anything about cancer. She said it was just a nodule." "It is a cancerous nodule, Mrs. Williams. Dr. Thompson is removing her entire thyroid gland as we speak." This is a serious procedure with potential complications, including a risk of post-operative bleeding that requires close monitoring for at least 72 hours. But she said she just needed a ride home. Sandra protested weakly, her mind reeling. Your daughter currently has no one to provide that level of care. She has arranged for a transport service, but that is medically insufficient. There was a long pause. In that silence, every dismissed phone call, every ignored text, every casual assumption of Amber's self-sufficiency coalesced into a crushing weight of guilt. I had no idea, Sandra finally whispered, her voice small. We would have never if we had known, and I understand this is a shock, Christine acknowledged. But Amber will be in recovery for several hours. There is still time. We'll be there, Sandra said, her voice now firm with a desperate, newfound resolve. All of us. Thank you, nurse. Thank you for telling us what our daughter would not. N.S.H.E. rushed back to the table, her face pale. We have to go. Now, it's Amber. It's cancer. N.N.T.H.E. Journey back to consciousness was a slow, painful swim up from a dark, deep ocean. My first awareness was of a rhythmic beeping, then a burning, throbbing pain across my throat. I tried to swallow and immediately regretted it. I blinked, and the blurry shape of a recovery room nurse came into focus. Then I felt a warm pressure on my hand. Someone was holding it, and I turned my head, wincing at the movement, and saw a figure slumped in the chair beside my bed, their head resting on the mattress near my arm. It took my foggy, anesthetized brain several moments to process what I was seeing. The silver-streaked hair, the turquoise bracelet. I must be hallucinating. She was in Cabo. She couldn't be here. But then her head lifted, revealing red-rimmed eyes and tear-stained cheeks. Amber, she whispered, her voice cracking. Oh, sweetheart, you're awake. I stared at her, confused, and tried to speak, but only managed a painful croak. Don't talk, she urged, grabbing a notepad. With a shaking hand, I scrawled a single word. Cabo? N.N.H.E.R. face crumpled. We came back as soon as we heard. Honey, why didn't you tell us? Before I could answer, the curtain was pulled aside, and there they were. My father, his face etched with worry, Jake looking awkward and guilty. Heather, already sobbing. They crowded around my bed, their presence overwhelming and princess. My father said, using a nickname he hadn't called me since I was 10. We got here as fast as we could. They had come. They had abandoned their non-refundable vacation for me. The realization was a dizzying mix of relief and a deep, simmering anger that it had taken this, a nurse's call, the word cancer, to make them finally show up. The uncomfortable silence in the recovery room stretched on, thick with years of unsaid things. Finally, my mother, her face a mask of genuine remorse, spoke. Amber, we didn't understand how serious it was. I picked up the notepad again, my hand shaking with more than just post-surgical weakness. The words I wrote were sharp, uneven. You never asked, Anne. You said it was just a thyroid thing? My dad protested weakly. You didn't care enough to ask? I wrote, my tears blurring the ink. N.N.T.H.E. emotional dam finally broke. Years of being overlooked, of being taken for granted, of being the reliable one who never needed anything. It all came pouring out in those silent, written words. Jake looked down, unable to meet my eyes. You're right, he admitted quietly. We've taken you for granted for years. Heather was openly sobbing now. I've been so selfish, Amber. So wrapped up in my own life. Their acknowledgments should have felt vindicating, but they just made me tired. I wrote one last message. I needed you before this too. My mother read it and nodded, fresh tears falling. "I know," she whispered, "and we weren't there. We can't change that. But we're here now. Will you let us try?" And I didn't have a simple answer. But looking at their faces, truly contrite, truly present, I gave a small, cautious nod. And weeks that followed were a strange new reality. My tiny apartment, usually a quiet sanctuary, became a hub of family activity. My mother moved into my spare room. My father came daily with food. Jake and Heather took shifts, ensuring I was never alone. As my throat healed and my voice returned, the real work began. The conversations were difficult, sometimes tearful, always necessary. "I've been jealous of you," Heather confessed during one drive to a follow-up appointment. "You're so capable. I always felt like the mess by comparison. I'm not put together," I told her, my voice still raspy. "I'm just good at pretending. It's what everyone expected of me." Jake, to his credit, presented me with a repayment plan for the $15,000, with interest. It wasn't just about the money, it was about accountability. My mother and I had the hardest conversation. "We fell into roles a long time ago," she explained, tears in her eyes. "We saw your self-sufficiency not as a quality to nurture, but as a permission to focus elsewhere. We mistook your competence for invulnerability." NSIX. Months after my surgery, standing in front of my mirror, I examined the faint pink scar across my neck. My family wasn't perfect, but they were present. My needs mattered, my boundaries were respected. I was finally visible. The most surprising part was that I didn't regret what happened. The nurse's call, the brutal confrontation with the truth while they were on a beach in Cabo, was the wake-up call we all needed. Sometimes it takes the prospect of losing something to recognize its true value. For my family, the possibility of losing me made them finally see me. And for me, facing my own mortality helped me understand that being strong doesn't mean being alone.